G'day, Dave here. One of the problems that we see in Ecclesiastes, or that the writer of Ecclesiastes brings to our attention, and we certainly see it around about us, is the problem of injustice. That is, people getting away with corruption and evil, and people who, it seems, are innocent getting into trouble for it, or the evildoer prospering and making a pretty good living out of life, and people who try and do what's right struggling and sometimes suffering because of that. And it leads the writer of Ecclesiastes to the verdict that, look, unless there is going to be a judgment, unless there is something to come, then it's all pretty meaningless. It doesn't really matter how you live. And he explores this tension, and I want to put it to you like this. That is, if there is no judgment to come, then it doesn't ultimately matter how you live now. You may as well live the way that's going to make you happiest and you most comfortable here and now. But if there is a judgment to come, if there is value and purpose and meaning, if there are things that are wise and unwise, things that are right and things that are wrong, if you're to be held account for the way that you live, if evil is actually going to be brought into the light and receive its punishment, then it matters critically how we live now. And it's this question that he's grappling with. And we see it from a number of perspectives. But before we look at Ecclesiastes, I want to read to you the perspective of an academic from the United States. He's an atheist, I think he's a philosopher, and he's written on Darwinism. And this is what he says: "There are no gods, no purposes, and no goal-directed forces of any kind. There's no life after death. When I die, I am absolutely certain that I'm going to be dead. That's the end of me. There's no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning in life. Since we know that we are not going to live after we die, there is no reward for suffering in this world. You live and you die." Now, I want to take issue with that, and one word in particular. It says, since we know that we are not going to live after we die. Does he know that? Do you know that? Do I know that? I mean, he certainly believes that. But I believe that there is life after we die. And the place I go to for evidence for that is the resurrection of Jesus. And we've talked about that before, and we do need to keep coming back to that, because the Christian message stands or falls on the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. If he wasn't raised, then yes, sure, no judgment, no justice. Live as you please. Get what you can from life. Let's have a look then at what the writer of Ecclesiastes has to say as he explores this question. Come back to chapter 8, and I'll pick it up at verse 10. "Then too I saw the wicked buried, those who used to come and go from the holy place and receive praise in the city where they did this. This too is meaningless." Now, I think he's saying it's meaningless because the wicked people are now dead and they haven't been judged for it. So they haven't had justice in this life. Therefore, ergo, if there's no life afterwards, then they've got away with it. That's the implication. But, of course, what if there is a judgment that's to come? He goes on, "When the sentence for a crime is not quickly carried out, people's hearts are filled with schemes to do wrong. Although a wicked person who commits 100 crimes may live a long time, I know that it will go better with those who fear God, who are reverent before him. Yet because the wicked do not fear God, it will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow." Now, the first part of that, I think people getting away with living corrupt lives and there being no judgment emboldens us to corruption as well. You see it, here's a simple illustration. If you know that there is no police, no speed radar on a particular road, then maybe you're inclined to drive however you please. But if you know you're going to get caught, and you know there'll be a fine, and you know you'll lose points, and you know there's no escaping it, then that has an impact upon the way that you drive, or at least it should. Now, in verses 12 and 13, he's saying that whilst the wicked may live a long time, there will actually be a judgment. And so therefore, in verses 12 and 13, it's actually better for those who fear God. Now we're going to come back to this idea of fearing God, but at its heart it's got to do with recognizing that we're creatures and God is the creator and we owe him. God has given us life, and the way we live this life, we live it to God or in opposition to God. And there is a right way and a wrong way. And the right way is actually to fear God, to recognize that he is God and that he's near us, that we are to be reverent before him, it says. And he goes on in verse 14, there's something else meaningless that occurs on earth. The righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked who get what the righteous deserve, and this too, I say, is meaningless. That is, not only are there times when you think they've got away with it, but there are times when, yes, they've got away with doing evil and been treated well for it, and others have done good and have been treated poorly for it. Now, we've seen a number of examples of this in Australia in recent times, and this cry for justice, I think we see it when they say you've got to have a royal commission into something. So we have a royal commission into the stolen generation, and it unearths appalling treatment of Aboriginal children taken from their home, from their birth parents, and raised as white people in a different place with a different set of parents and different society, or institutional abuse, or the Royal Commission into what's largely turned out to be the horrors of the established churches and church schools and the way that they've treated children with abuse. Or you look at the Banking Royal Commission and the appalling behaviour of banks in gouging customers and even charging people who've since passed on. See, there is a picture here of things needing to be brought to account, and it's absolutely meaningless when they're not. And so in verse 15, he finishes this section saying, so I commend the enjoyment of life, because there's nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life that God has given them under the sun. Now, twice in this verse, we get that phrase, under the sun. And it's like a limited view, a limited perspective. We'll just look at what's in front of us. And when you look at what's in front of you, you may as well just live a quiet life and get on and enjoy it. Don't be too fussed about trying to prosper through injustice. Don't envy the people who seem to be getting everything. Just enjoy what you've got. Now, it's a helpful perspective. It's a limited perspective. It's good, but it's not ultimate. It's not the good to be sought after. No, the good, the ultimate good to be sought after can only come by a recognition that God is going to bring things to account, that there will be a reckoning. And friends, if there's going to be a day of reckoning, and the Bible says that it's been appointed for us to die, and we're coming to grips with that. Ecclesiastes is talking about that. We're going to die, but we're also going to face judgment. Will we be prepared for that day? And the only way to be prepared is by putting your trust in Jesus paying your debt for you. That's the only option. Let me encourage you to keep looking to Jesus. Thank you.